Hi, I'm Doug from Dynamic Computing, and welcome to episode 130 of 10-Minute Amiga Retrocast. Today, we're revisiting my old friend, the Amiga 1200, the one who hasn't had her case screws installed in her in like 4 years because I keep on taking things in and pulling things out of her, but she loves it. What we're installing today is a gorgeous new Accelerator from our friend Aibb and his crew that helped design it. Their contact information will be right in the description. Now, this is the Tsunami 1230 board that you may have heard about, and it is a fantastic accelerator board for the Amiga 1200 that we're going to be taking a look at. This thing is incredibly compatible, incredibly easy to install and configure, and is designed from the ground up to be compatible and similar to the ubiquitous Blizzard 1230 board that was out many, many years ago. Let's take a closer look at the board itself right this way. Let's take a look at what this little beauty offers. First, it's incredibly well designed. If you look at the board, it's a nice black board. All the soldering on here is just exemplary. They really did a good job on the soldering on here. It has a 68030 chip. This is a 40 megahertz variety on here, but some of them probably have a 33 on here. This is overclocked to 42 megahertz. Now, the other interesting thing is this is the EC version of the chip, meaning it does not have a memory management unit. More on that later. She has 64 megabytes of 32-bit fast RAM, which is a huge help for the system. And it also, being 32-bit fast RAM, it makes this fully compatible with PCMCIA on your Amiga 1200. You don't have to worry about memory conflicts. Now notice there's also a place to mount a 68882 floating point unit, and you will notice I've already done that on mine. Normally, like in the picture that I showed you first, this is just a blank area here where you could put in a socket or solder a chip directly. I've already got mine on there. Now here, this is curious. This is an expansion bus. Kind of a custom thing. It looks like it's like a PCIe bus. What does it say? Says it's the same pinout as a mini PCI bus on here, but this does not take mini PCI cards. This is going to take custom cards that they have not announced yet. Who knows, maybe retargetable graphics, maybe a USB card. Now that would be really cool. Possibly hard drive interface. That would be sweet on here. A nice fast buffered IDE interface. Who knows what they're going to do with this little expansion. On the bottom here, you have headers, so you can have a clock port, a standard clock port soldered in for a real-time clock, and you can usually buy these with that header already on there. Cool design in the back too, huh? Now installing this is really easy. You can install it from the bottom of the machine if you want to, but I already had the top open on mine. Now like a lot of Amiga 1200s, you almost have to pull the accelerator card out a millimeter or so for it to be registered with the system. It's just a design flaw with the original 1200. Slots right in place. Now, being that this does not have an MMU or any custom circuitry, you're not going to be able to flash your Kickstart right into the 32-bit memory, which is sad. I'm sorry that it doesn't have that feature, but being that the Amiga 1200 has faster Kickstart access than the 600 or the 2000, it doesn't make as much of a difference as it would on an older machine. Now this has been tested with Kickstarts from 1.3 up to 3.2.1. These are custom 3.2.1 ROMs right in here. They're the ones designed to work with my Terrible Fire 1260 board, but they also work perfectly fine with this. And notice you don't need any active cooling or passive cooling on either the floating point unit or the processor because this is the EC chip. It runs fairly cool. You know, before we boot her up, let's talk just a little bit more about the floating point unit, which in my world is a necessity. Once you put a socket on for the floating point unit like I did, you can just plug this little 50 megahertz 68882. They only cost a couple bucks. Then on the bottom of the board, there's a little jumper that says no FPU. You just yank that little guy out, but then it has to get a clock signal. Now mine did not have a jumper header for clock signal for the 68882, so I soldered a little one on here. Pins 1 and 2 here, if that's selected, it is going to use the clock that is built into the system, and it's going to run the 50 megahertz chip at 42 megahertz, which is fine in my case. Or, I believe it's right here, you can add a standard oscillator onto here, like a 50 megahertz oscillator, move this little jumper over, so pins 2 and 3, then the floating point unit will run at a full 50 megahertz. I'm not going to bother doing that right now. Maybe something I'd do down the road. Once you turn it on, the miracle that is the Amiga automatically detects the 64 megabytes of RAM. And we're going to go in here and we're going to see that it also detects just beautifully the 68030 CPU and the FPU. So here we've got 68030, FPU 68882, MMU not available as you would suspect. Now, when you use a 68030 board on an Amiga OS 3.14 through 3.21, you're going to want this library installed. This is the 68030 library. It comes right on your Amiga disks that came with your operating system. You're going to want to install that. Now, it'll work without it. You just have to put the CPU/no check flag in your startup sequence, but you really want to use this. This is really going to help things out. And it's okay that there's no MMU because this particular library does not use the MMU. Now, once you see everything boot, you can see a tremendous performance increase just moving windows around. Now, I usually run Amiga OS on here in 16 color mode, but even if you bump up the colors, you'll see it still performs pretty darn well. Let's take her up to 64 colors for the workbench. You don't really want to go much beyond there, even with a really fast CPU, because it slows down the workbench screen and it makes things run a little bit worse as far as screen updates and things like that. It uses a lot of chip RAM too. But you see it perfectly acceptable speeds for something like this. Now, it's not going to be the performance upgrade that you're going to get with a 68040 or a 68060, but it is actually really, really good. And the 68030 tends to be much more compatible than the 040 or the 060. So when you're running these various programs, you have a really much better luck with it running with a 68040 CPU or 68030 CPU as opposed to one of the other ones. You have fewer compatibility issues. And you can see nice and zippy as we open things up. Here's a little D-Paint 5. Who's this register? Good old Ian Coggins. He's such a great guy. And we're going to go with a high-res laced screen, 256 colors for deluxe paint. And it opens up nicely. Let's open up an image, see how the performance is. We'll go to work, we'll go to docs, we'll go to pictures. Let's go with one that doesn't give the thing a heart attack. Beautiful. Look how quickly that opens up. Those are some flowers from my front yard. Everything is really, really, really snappy with this accelerator. Now, as an Amiga aficionado here, I am under a legal obligation to show every single accelerator running sysinfo. It's literally in the contract that I signed. So we're going to launch sysinfo, and I also am legally obligated to say, oh, sysinfo sucks and everybody knows it, even though it doesn't, and every single one of us uses it and we all love it. Finds my clock, NTSC, high res, 68030, 68082. No, there is not an MMU in here. Let's take a look at some of the performance on here. We're going to run the regular performance test, see what sysinfo tells us. And 9224 dry stones. We are faster than a regular A1200 by a rather large margin. We are faster than an Amiga 3000 by a rather large margin because of the faster CPU, the faster RAM, and the AGA chipset. Really good. Now let's look at some of the drive speeds here. 2.1 megabytes per second. Even on my Blizzard card, my 1240 Blizzard card, I usually only get 1.6 to 1.8 megabytes per second. So I'm impressed that for some reason this runs faster than my Blizzard card. It runs the hard drive 300 or 400K faster. Really kind of nice. Now I am also under a legal obligation by the Amiga authorities. With every Accelerator video, you have to run Frontier Elite 2, and you have to watch the demo for Frontier Elite 2. Now the truth is, nobody's ever actually played this game before. Literally, no one in the world has ever played Frontier Elite 2. All we've ever done is start the introductory demo and watch the demo with an Accelerator to see how it performs. So maybe there's a game behind here, maybe there's not. And so yeah, we just have to ooh and ah over how fast it works with the 68030 card. Let's take a second and peek at the game. Whee! Fly, Mr. Spaceship. Get him. Whee! Uh-oh, the bad guys are coming. What are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? Run! It's actually really fluid and really quick. Now, with all of my legal obligations out of the way, we can actually look at one of the other utilities that is really useful, and that is Aibb. This really works like a charm and is very configurable. Does not work by default very well with a 68060. You have to get a special version for it. Now here, we're going to use 68020 code and the math coprocessor. With 1200, we're going to just tell it to use 68020, and we're going to tell both of these to use the math coprocessor. So when it does the comparisons, it will compare it properly. MU test, we're going to take a look here. And she comes back very, very strongly. So much faster than a 1200, faster than an A3000, just under where you're going to see for an Amiga 4000. You see it detects, well, here it says it's a 43 megahertz CPU and FPU, which is nice. It's pretty close to what it is. Let's take a look at the right pixel test. This is where it's actually hitting the hardware and drawing pixels on the screen. And you can see it's fairly zippy here. Let's see how it compares to some of our friends. Yeah, not bad. Again, we're ahead of the pack, exactly where we assume we're going to be ahead at, and a little behind a 68040. Now, if my Amiga had my Blizzard 040 card in here, we'd be way up here. But this is fine for what most people use. Now, this is a test over here. When you see these tests in yellow, this means it's going to use the math coprocessor on here. So in situations where you're using a math coprocessor, this eats a lot of the other ones alive. Part of the reason this occasionally will be faster than an Amiga 4000 is because this 68882 on an Amiga 4000 built into the processor is running at 25 megahertz. So this is actually overclocked. So some of those tests will be a little bit faster. Here's the lovely old beach ball. Now, if you've ever tried to generate this on a 68000 CPU with no math coprocessor, it takes like 3 or 4 minutes to create. Here, we're ahead of the pack. Amiga 4000 beats us, and we're going to look at the C-pixel test last. See where we come in with this. Right where we expect to be. Now, using my good old standbys, like Art Department Professional, everything is nice and zippy with it. And it is zippy because it's got a full 64 megabytes of RAM to play with. So if we pull in some nice images here, let's pull in a nice picture. Arizona sunset, that's a nice one. We'll pull in that. It loads it up nice and fast. And yeah, super high res mode, 8-bit ham. Let's see how quickly it can generate a ham 8 image in 1280 by 720. Anything that uses the floating point unit on Art Department Professional is going to be lickety-split fast. To be honest, this may be the non-FPU version of Art Department Professional because I've been using it with my Terrible Fire 060 card. But you see, still pretty darn zippy for a 1280 by 720 ham 8 image. Not half bad really. Does a nice job. So how do I feel about the Tsunami 1230 accelerator for the Amiga 1200 right there? Well, pretty darn good. Now, of course, my Amiga 1200 for years has had a Blizzard 1240 card. Of course, that's faster. Now I'm using it with my Terrible Fire 68060 card, which I did a review on right there. So obviously that's going to be faster, but this is also less expensive than those cards. Anyone who owns a stock Amiga 1200 or maybe just an A1200 with maybe some RAM expansion, look at this card. This hits all the sweet spots and it hits them just about perfectly. A list of resellers will be right in the description, but you can go to Retro Passion, which our good friend Steve Clifford runs, Amigastore.eu, Alinea Computer. They all list this as being something you can purchase from them. Stock fluctuates, so if you don't see it in stock, order it and it'll get to you as soon as they get a new batch in, but definitely order one. Now, do I have any concerns about the board? Because you know, you watch my show, nothing's perfect. Well, this one's pretty darn close to perfect. Would I prefer to have a 68030 with an MMU so I could use the Kickstart remapping features of MMU library? Absolutely. You'd get a little bit more performance out of it, a little more hard drive speed, everything would feel zippier, but it's not the end of the world. It's still really fast. I'd love it if it shipped with a 68882 socket at least on there, so you can just buy the chip and plug it in and have the jumper already there for choosing which oscillator you want to use. It just saves you some hassle of having to do a little soldering, but again, not the end of the world. And you can actually order these right with the socket and right with the FPU right on it. Just a couple bucks more, it'll come with everything. There is also some software that's available. You can download from the Tsunami website that lets you control a few of the features on it, turn on and off features through software. I'll have a link in the description so you can download that software if you have one of these cards. Huge thanks to my patrons, who you see scrolling up the screen here. Anyone recognize this image? I bet you do. This is a 1280 by 720 ham 8 image from Stranger Things and is one of the images I'm working on for this year's Amiga Art Contest. You have heard of the Amiga Art Contest, haven't you? If you want to become a patron and be able to vote in this year's Amiga Art Contest, pop on over to patreon.com/10mark for more information. Thanks everybody, you guys are the best. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Please like and subscribe. All of that really helps the videos. Please comment below. Tell me about what accelerator you use on your Amiga 1200 and tell me which accelerator you want to use on it. There's so many of them available right now. Follow me on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Facebook, and any place else you can find me. But until next time, this is Doug from 10 Minute Amiga Retrocast, signing out.